Hi there. I'm going to give you a quick update on the Kristin Smart murder trial. So currently, the defense and the prosecution are making motions to have evidence kept out and to have evidence admissible for the trial. So as of last Friday, there were a couple witnesses, forensic experts, and it looks like it's going to be a fight over these soil samples. Now, apparently what happened was the prosecution had the soil tested underneath the deck of the home of Ruben Flores. He's currently one of the defendants being charged with an accessory after the fact. His son, Paul Flores, who is reportedly the last person seen with Kristin Smart. He was a fellow college student with Kristin Smart at Cal Poly back in 1996. The government's case is that Paul Flores killed Kristin Smart, and Ruben Flores helped Paul bury the body, her body, underneath Ruben Flores' home. Now, it's a terrible, terrible tragedy, and no one has seen Kristin Smart for over 26 years. So last week, the judge is going to allow the cadaver dog evidence to come in. The cadaver dogs alerted on the deck, two independent dogs alerted on the deck underneath, or I should say the area underneath the deck of Ruben Flores' home. And there were soil samples taken. So what happened last Friday, and I'll give you this highlights of some of the testimony. The defense obviously wants to keep the soil samples out. The prosecution is testing these forensic experts that the defense is putting on the stand to explain these soil samples. So let me give you some of the highlights. Okay, so by the way, please do subscribe. Please support my work by subscribing. Hit that like button, hit the bell notification. Please do leave a comment or a question because I want to know what your analysis is. This video is for education information, simply my analysis. All right, so Cindy Arlington as a forensic archaeologist, and she testified last week relating to the ground underneath, the soil underneath the deck being dug up, and she testified that there was a bathtub ring stain that she identified in that soil. So, and she also talked about there being liquid. Now the question is, what was buried there? What's the liquid related to? So she was called back to the stand on Friday, and during cross-examination, she said she was unable to tell the age of the staining of the soil. Unable to tell the age of the staining of the soil underneath Ruben Flores' deck. But she was confident to say that the area was dug up on two occasions. Dug up to possibly place a body, and dug up to remove the body, which is what the prosecution is alleging that these defendants did before they were arrested. Okay? So the defense attorney then called Dr. David Carter, and both of these witnesses, by the way, testified by way of Zoom. Dr. Carter is a professor of forensic sciences at Chaminade University in Honolulu. He received the photos of the area underneath the deck and the reports from the defense attorney, and he made his own analysis. And then he sent someone to collect new samples of the soil underneath the deck so that he could examine. Okay, so what did he find? So the defense attorney asked Dr. Carter if a body had been buried in one location and then reburied in another, what characteristics would he expect to find in the soil at the second location? Dr. Carter said he didn't think anybody could answer that question. So then the defense said that they had asked the DA's office for their soil samples to have them analyzed, but the DA refused. And the reason the prosecutor refused was because the defense wanted to have the soil samples analyzed by an uncertified laboratory, so they refused to provide the samples. So the defense had Dr. Carter get new samples. So Dr. Carter had someone collect the samples underneath Ruben Flores' deck in his yard. And he said that all the samples that he tested had unusually high concentrations of iron, like iron in the blood, right? On cross-examination, the Dr. Carter said that he's only dealt with 2 studies where actual human remains were being used. So again, the prosecution is trying to figure out whether or not this Dr. Carter or any of the defense experts are qualified, right? Are they qualified to give an opinion regarding human remains, the composition of decomposition of human remains, and the testing of soil samples? So, on cross examination, the government pointed out, the prosecutor pointed out, that this expert, Dr. Carter, had only dealt with 2 studies regarding human remains, and the rest of his studies were related to pig and rat carcasses. So, how relevant is this expert's testimony? I imagine is what the prosecution is going to get into. So again, these pretrial motions are very helpful to figure out what's the defense's case and what's the prosecution's case. What are they asking in cross-examination? Why are they calling these witnesses? And what can you use this testimony? Can it be helpful, or can you be able to discredit these witnesses in cross-examination? Okay, so Dr. Carter said he tested the soil samples and that he wasn't present when the soil samples were collected, and since he wasn't present, he wasn't able to visually confirm that these samples actually came from the yard that he tested. So the prosecution also asked if chemicals released from a decomposing body buried at a depth of 4 feet would seep downward in the soil due to gravity. In other words, would it sink down farther? Dr. Carter said that it would, and that samples were only taken for a depth of 0 inches to a maximum of 24 inches. So what the prosecution has pointed out, that this defense expert, Dr. Carter, tested soil only 2 feet, only down to 2 feet, where the prosecution is saying the body was buried 4 feet and the liquid would have gone farther downward. Therefore, the soil samples taken from Dr. Carter didn't even take soil samples from the area where the body was allegedly buried. Okay, so they're trying to discredit this expert. Then I think it's the defense asked. Then the defense attorney representing Ruben Flores asked Dr. Carter if he would expect to find a significant amount of fluid in the soil where a 6'1" person was buried for several years. Now, Kristin Smart was 6 feet. I think she was 6'1", 6 feet. So the defense is trying to point out, would you expect to find a significant amount of fluid if a body had been buried there for years? Dr. Carter said that yes, he would expect to find that. So he would expect to find a significant amount of fluid. Now the question was a significant amount of fluid found? Whether or not that's relevant, and what the prosecution is going to say in response. So then the defense attorney representing Paul Flores asked, they actually called Dr. Elizabeth Johnson. So they called another witness. Elizabeth Johnson, who's a forensic science consultant with a PhD in immunology. And what did she testify to? She testified that the tests that were collected from the prosecution's serologist expert, she testified of the soil samples tested from the staining in the soil underneath Ruben Flores' deck, that 5 tested positive for the presence of human blood. 5 tested positive for the presence of human blood, 4 came back weak positive, and 3 tested negative. So as you can see, the defense is trying to show that yes, of the several samples, there's discrepancies regarding the results. Some tested positive for human blood, some came back negative. So this is going to be a call for the jury. This is a case where there's no body. Unfortunately, no one has seen Kristin Smart. Her remains have never been found. So this is a murder trial without a body. So they have to accumulate all the circumstances. What do the soil samples tell us? What is the stain on the mattress cover from Paul Flores' dorm room? Who was the last person seen with Kristin Smart? What statements did each of these defendants make? Were they incriminating or were they not? So the prosecution has to build a case because they don't have a body here. Okay? It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. So this doctor, Dr. Johnson, the defense's expert here, also said that the tests that were used were not properly validated for soil testing at the time. So again, the defense is trying to discredit the methods of the soil collection and the soil testing. So we'll see what happens next. So what's also coming up is they need to pick a jury now for Ruben Flores' case. So they've already picked a jury for Paul Flores. Now they need to pick a jury for Ruben Flores' case, because this trial is going to be one trial with two juries. All right, so I'll keep you posted. So please do hit the like button. Please leave a comment or a question. I want to know what your analysis is. Please do share these videos, and please do subscribe and support my work. Thank you so much for watching.